Hey, composers, it's... What the heck just came out of my mouth? Today we're doing another chat with a really talented composer named Christopher Sue. Some of you may have seen Chris's channel, but for those who haven't, Chris is a really talented educator, composer, content creator, and a songwriter who has a great YouTube channel that I highly recommend. I wanted to do this chat with Chris to learn about his backstory a little bit, sort of how he found his beginnings in YouTube and how it's shaped his composition career, and basically just kind of chat back and forth and share some insights. It's always fun to talk to other composers. This can be a very isolating industry, and I think any opportunity for composers to chat with each other is a good one. So I hope you enjoy it. If you do, please do leave a like at the end of the video and subscribe for more content. I don't know much about like your backstory. Do you want to like just talk about your backstory and how you got started?
Yeah, man. So I pretty much got started as any other little kid going into music. Like my parents wanted to have me experience like piano, maybe violin, like try any different instruments. But I started with piano and I really enjoyed it and took classical lessons up until maybe, I don't know, 12, 13 years old. Got my, ARCT exams and diplomas. And then I started doing more songwriting in high school, and I started to discover a love for writing music instead of reproducing other people's music, which to me felt like, yeah, it's still an artistic thing, but it's not as fulfilling as if you're creating your own music, right? So that's kind of how composition and all that started. And when I went to university for piano performance, I was still kind of dabbling in composing and stuff, and that's when I kind of started the YouTube channel and put out, a video a week at least. And it's just been a really fun time to see the audience grow, people start enjoying the content, and then eventually being able to work with developers and other YouTubers and people. And the whole process has just been a lot of fun, and just really excited to see how things continue from here. But I think if there's any takeaway we can say is that being online and putting yourself out there is really, I think, necessary in today's climate if you're trying to make some sort of income or living as a composer or musician, right?
Well, that's what I was gonna ask you too, because obviously we have this in common as content creators, and yeah. I also started my channel my channel was started for me by my dad. And
cool.
Then eventually, yeah, he was, because I played piano, so it was initially as a performance channel, and then eventually started shifting to composition. But what motivated you back then to start the YouTube channel?
Yeah, so actually, it was funny because I think my first ever YouTube channel was a card trick channel, which I started back in like '07, and then nice. I had that going until 11 or so, and then I started a piano channel specifically. And that was all for like covers and all that. And then I did a tennis channel, which is still up currently for like highlights and stuff. And then I started this current YouTube channel, which is literally just my name, maybe coming up on 4 years ago now. And it was really when I was starting to get into composition. So I knew I wanted to dedicate a channel specifically to this because I kind of knew that I wanted to do it long term. And it was just better to start clean than to try to repurpose an existing channel. Yeah. But so starting on YouTube has always been something that I've been more or less comfortable with. So kind of had that experience like yourself, working with videos before.
Have you always felt comfortable like talking in front of a camera?
I think doing card tricks in front of friends and practicing on my other channels definitely gave me some practice, but I'm a natural introvert for sure. So it definitely took a lot of practice.
Yeah, it's funny. I think that's something that a lot of composers I've talked to have in common, especially the content creator ones, is I think we tend to look more extroverted just by nature of like the camera. Yeah. But I sort of feel I might be an ambivert myself because I like talking to people, but I have a time limit.
Right.
Then I'm like, all right, that's enough for the week.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting. But I always hear a lot of people that will struggle. They say like, oh, like I'd love to do YouTube, but like I'm really nervous talking in front of a camera.
Right.
Like, do you have people that approach you with that same problem, or how do you think that they can overcome that if that's the thing that's stopping them?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing though. I don't really think being in front of a camera is actually really necessary. And you can even do a bunch of screencasts with just sharing your screen and maybe you're doing a little voiceover, but I mean, I know some people, they literally just play through their sessions. Maybe they just click a few MIDI channels to show their data in there. But, I think anything is better than just putting up music nowadays. And there's just so many things you can do. Like again, you don't have to show your face. You can literally just do a quick voiceover. Any sort of mic will do. But just sharing a bit of your process, or even if you're not doing tutorial videos, even just showing yourself writing in real time, anyone can learn from someone else. So
yeah. And that approach, I think one thing you also do on your channel too is you have an educative, sharing, open approach, which is something that I try to do as well. And it's not, because for me, what I used to do is I used to do like just composition playthroughs. It would just be my music playing through. And then I, for at least my channel, was trying to think, well, what's the motivation for somebody to actually watch this or stay engaged in my content beyond just the music itself? So, like, I noticed that you, also Mattia, a lot of other composers, they spend the majority of the time on the channel actually teaching.
Yeah.
Which seems to provide a lot of value, I think, to composers as well.
Right. It's interesting because, like you said, it really comes down to that one thing, and that's value. So it's like there's so many ways you can do it, but the most, I guess, obvious form of doing it is to share what you know with other people. But then again, like value can also come in the form of entertainment or being motivated or something. So if you can incorporate several of those things into one, that's even better. But I think for most of us, like you and me and Mattia or whatever, doing the educational stuff is the most direct form of communication with those people. And also like entertaining and all that comes more naturally to some people than others, of course. It's more difficult for me, but and also, what was the other thing? Motivation. Yeah, like you can definitely add motivation and encouragement into content very easily, I think, especially if you're doing educational stuff. So I think in order to get your message across effectively, you have to have a dose of encouragement,
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, I didn't think of that, but it's true. Like even just or like enthusiasm, you know, just showing that you love what you do, I guess can be a kind of, because I've always been that type of person too, that if I see somebody who's doing something and it's obvious that they love it, it's very infectious. Like
it is,
even if you're not interested in the thing in the first place, just there, it just kind of like bleeds off.
Yes, exactly. Like you see on many YouTube videos, like people say like, I have no idea what they're talking about, but they make me feel like I want to learn that thing, and vice versa. You can have like the best information in the world, but if you have a very bland personality and you can't get people to stay, then it's not going to keep your audience hooked.
Well, that's why I feel, because I've talked to people, I don't know if you know about my background, but like I have a duet channel with Frank where we do like piano duets, video game covers and stuff. And that channel did, I mean, to date, much better than like my channel. A lot of performance stuff, if they blow up, can. Yes. But it was interesting because like we would constantly be getting cover requests.
Right.
Naturally, like Gravity Falls or, a lot of anime. I don't even watch anime, so like I didn't know most of the music. But it was interesting because like we made a really conscious choice really early in that channel to only do the stuff that we liked. Yeah. And I think it was really important because like maybe on one hand we would lose some viewership, but on the other hand, we're more authentically engaged in what we're doing. And I think that passion bleeds off, because if you're just doing videos simply because you think they'll do well, like you kind of lose something, in terms of your investment to the video in the first place.
Yes. And people can see that as well. Like they can sense it from across the world. And I think that's also applicable to composers in general, right? Like if we're writing music just for the sake of writing music and we're not really invested in the idea, then it's very difficult to produce something that we're proud of or that we want to share to the world, right? But again, everyone's circumstance is so different. It's like maybe you have to do it just because you're doing it for a living and you need those royalties, let's say, and those placements. But so I think it's always a balance, no matter what we're doing, is how much of it is actually benefiting us and our audience versus we're doing it for our own personal fulfillment. And I think that's kind of like a lifelong process to figure that out.
Yeah. It's a really good point too, because like you said, the needs can change over time. Has your work on YouTube gotten you more work, like gravitated towards the things that you're interested in, or things that you didn't expect, or combination?
Right. So I have to say, like 100% of the work I've gotten in terms of like orchestration or composing or anything like that has been from the YouTube channel. For sure.
So awesome.
Yeah,
so
like
awesome.
Undoubtedly, for sure. Like before I started the channel, I literally had nothing to show for myself in terms of the orchestration space and all of that. I was a piano major, you know, I did music my whole life, but no one was gonna know about me if I didn't put myself out there in some way,
Sure.
you know, and that's the case with all of us. So, yeah, definitely very very thankful that it worked out the way it did. But I have to chalk it up to just being consistent and staying on a schedule, because then people can learn to kind of depend on your content, and the more you give out, the more that's going to come back eventually, you know.
Yeah. So how do you manage your schedule? Because I know a lot of people ask me that as doing content creation and composing and teaching. I think you also do teaching as well.
Yeah.
So what do you do to kind of balance that schedule?
Right. So I mean, teaching is kind of like the bread and butter, I would say. I've always done like piano and theory lessons in person and online anyway, but doing the composing stuff has been a really nice additional source of income and all that. But in terms of balance, because like due to COVID and stuff, the in-person teaching has kind of dialed back a little bit, which gave me more time to work on my online business and also just try to build up more of the orchestration stuff in the first place. So right now it's kind of like a mix of both. The teaching is probably about, let's say, 40%, and then the orchestration stuff is, let's say, 30%. And then the online business stuff is another 30%, where I'm just working on more trainings, more content, and then more products and all that stuff. So I think over time you start to refine your process more and more as you start to develop your passion for a certain area. And then you can kind of start to hone in on that if you want that to be your primary like source of living, if you will.
Yeah. And do you try to compartmentalize those things? Like in terms of your day-to-day schedule, are you someone that likes to have every hour blocked out, or do you have more like a to-do list, or neither?
Right. The only thing I have blocked out is literally my teaching times, because I have to do those, of course.
Yeah.
But aside from that, for the free hours of the day, currently I like to do something where the night before I'll write down like the top 3 things I need to get done the day after, and then I'll make sure I get those things done, and then I know that I've been productive, and then anything on top is just the icing on the cake, you know. But because I would prefer to have a slightly more free schedule where, you know, I can enjoy time and do what I want, but I have to get those things done first. And then, of course, the teaching stuff is the main responsibility. So I have to do that too.
That's really similar to the way, because I've tried a lot of different ways too. Like I've tried to block out hour by hour, like work schedule.
That's
and
tough.
It is, because I feel like your brain knows. It's like you're tricking your mind into thinking that something is time sensitive to the hour.
Yeah.
When you know that as a YouTube video, it's like, and there's also, I think, the Parkinson's law thing, where it's that, you know, if you even remotely perceive that you've given yourself more time than you actually need to do it, you tend to just wait until the last hour anyway.
True.
At least for me, that's what it would be. It would be like, you know, it would be the hour before my wife would come home. I'd be like, okay, time to make the YouTube video, you know?
So true. Yeah.
Yeah, that's been my experience too. I find like it just, you have to find a healthy balance. And
Right.
so like with you, with scheduling, because, you know, as a independent person, you know, we make our own schedules and we kind of have to adhere to that. Do you feel ever like you should be working more? Like, do you ever feel guilt about not working hard enough?
Right.
Or how do you avoid it if you don't?
Yeah. I mean, to be completely honest, probably like every day to a certain degree, you know?
Sure.
But yeah, because when you are your like own boss, when you're a business owner for yourself, there's like 2 hats you can wear. There's like the employee version of yourself and then the CEO version, right? So the CEO version will always be like, oh, you know, there's more to do. And you have to come in on time. You have to get these tasks done. And then the employee actually has to come in and do all that work. But after all that's said and done, because you are your own boss, you get to determine what you do and don't do ultimately, right? So then it becomes a balance of like, do I actually have to get that done, or am I just doing busy work to just look busy, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like we said, it's a fine balance, and I'm trying to get better at that. But whenever I do have free time and I have an itch to work on something, then I'll try to do something for the online business, you know, or make more content or something.
Well, I'm reassured to hear you say that because I deal with that all the time too.
Yeah.
I had the worst one was when I had somebody did an interview of me and it was during quarantine and they started saying like, you know, you're always doing so much and you're just so busy, and how do you manage such a busy schedule? And like that week I had literally nothing. And it was just like, well, that stings a little bit.
Oh, no, if anything, that's like a compliment, right? But no, ultimately,
I guess so.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, just being like being free enough or having enough time to take time off, but allow or having other people perceive you as being busy. I don't think that's like a bad thing, but again, like working too hard can be something that is detrimental at the same time. It's tough.
Well, it's true because it's. I think it's funny. I was actually I don't know if you watch Matt Diavella. Do you know his channel? He's a
I've heard of him.
Really good channel, but he just made a video called "The Death of the 40-Hour Work Week," and it was really interesting because it was sort of highlighting something that I think I've been attuned to. Like I said, my wife works a standard like 40-hour week. Yeah. And the way I've compartmentalized my schedule generally is like when she's gone, I try to work. And when she comes back, I stop. So it keeps me somewhat balanced. I don't work on weekends. And it's interesting because I've noticed that I'll tend to feel guilty if for some reason it's 12 o'clock, if it's noon, and I'm done with all my work. It's like, whoa, what do I do
now? Yeah.
But I think what he was raising up in the video is that the type of work that would require 8-hour days is very different than the work that a lot of people do now. And to correlate like being productive with long hours is not necessarily the right way to look at it, where instead it's about, the output. So what you're bringing up about like, if being busy means getting a video out a week and teaching lessons and composing, and you can do it in 3 to 4 hours a day, it's not necessarily something you need to punish yourself for. It might just be the reality of what the work requires or the efficiency that you've like baked into your process and the way you work.
Yeah, that's super interesting. That brings up the 80-20 rule, right? It's like 80% of what you're doing is not actually necessary. The remaining 20% is actually what's driving your business forward and moving things along. And so yeah, sometimes doing that can be super helpful, and just eliminating unnecessary tasks that take up time just because we want to do it. That can be super helpful in just clearing out our schedule and helping us narrow our focus down on what to actually do. But at the same time, there's also merit in spending time doing the things that you do just because they feel good doing. Surfing YouTube, playing sports, all that is very necessary.
And maybe part of it too is like clearing the headspace to allow yourself the time to, like, it's not that you want to just rush from task to task, but it's more that when you're efficient in the things that are maybe like non creative, it gives you more headspace and more time to be able to kind of sit around in the creative spaces a little bit. Think about new business ideas, right, or just being still, I suppose.
Of course. Yeah. I think it all just comes down to a balance. And again, like the more mature we get, the more we experience, it becomes easier to kind of refine what we actually want and want to put out into the world ultimately.
What about imposter syndrome? Do you deal with that one? And how do you deal with that one?
Yeah, so I think I would definitely feel it a lot more if if my ultimate goal was to like work for some, I don't know, AAA composer, or, if I wanted to be like the top of the top or something, then I'd be like, oh, but I don't have these credits. I don't have like a master's in film scoring or, all that. But I'm fortunate not to feel it that much because I'm just sharing it because I want to share it. And I don't really care if people dislike it all that much, because I'm literally sharing because I think it's interesting what music can do. It's like, oh, you hear this little chord progression, you hear that 7/5 motion, or I don't know, that string line did that thing. It's more about sharing the love of music to other people rather than being like, oh, am I gonna be like found out that like this doesn't actually work, or someone has a different opinion? Is it gonna like bring the video down or something?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I can't deny that I haven't felt it before. It's I think very common for all of us if we're trying to, share about something. But at the same time, I think as long as we have a certain degree of expertise in something and we're confident in what we're doing, then we yeah, when we do get that feeling, we should just do it anyway, because it's better than cowering or holding back and doing nothing. So
Yeah. I think maybe sometimes people see it as like a form of modesty too, when I think
Sure,
actually
sure.
I think actually it can be sort of self-destructive.
Yes.
It's not really modest. It's more like self-depreciating. You're like putting yourself
Yes.
down,
Yes.
And I think that attitude is really good of what you're saying. It's like, just you see, it sounds so naturally when you say it. It's like, well, I like writing music. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's just really simple as that. It's like, doesn't really
Yeah.
matter your status against other people. It probably
Right.
also evolves from, I would imagine it's hard to have imposter syndrome unless you're making comparisons too.
True. Exactly. Yes. Yes. It's not like I'm saying, "Oh, I'm the next Hans Zimmer. I'm the next Alan
Right.
Menken." No, if you embrace who you are and just be authentically yourself, then you have no reason to feel like an imposter, right?
Yeah, right. Because it's simply your growth. It's just like
Yes.
your path. And I've always found too that if I catch that, I'll always try and I'll ask myself, how long have I been doing blank?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then, am I better today than I was a year ago?
Right.
And the answers are both always like affirming,
Yes,
and it's not
absolutely.
about being an expert. It's just about growing.
Yes, yes. And when it comes to the educational space, especially, people don't need you to be the very, very, very best. As long as you can help them in a certain way to help them improve their life in a very small way, even, that's all that matters. So you just have to be a step or two ahead of who you're helping, right?
I feel like too, maybe one thing we have in common, and I don't know if maybe this is just the nature of like what it means to be content creators too, but I feel that composer content creators understand that you could spend the majority of your time like sitting with your head, in a score and just improving craft to try and like, bridge that gap of imposter syndrome or whatever. But we seem to value taking the time to actually build something that outside of just the musical element, like whether it's building a business or building a platform or a brand. I think that we all kind of have like that entrepreneurial spirit a little bit and recognize that it's more than just about being good at music or being a skilled orchestrator or knowing every instrument's range, that there's a lot more to it than just the musical elements.
That's interesting. Yeah. I think ultimately it comes down to what you want to do with music in life, right? Like, do you want to just do it because you love doing it, so it becomes more of a hobby? And if so, then it gives you more freedom to tackle other things with the rest of your creative brain, let's say, right? But let's say if you want to actually make a living with your music, then that can kind of alter the way you, I guess, see life or see music in general. Like maybe you start to fall out of love with actually the creative side of making music. You're just doing it because you have to do it. But
Yeah.
I think as long as you continue to have a love for making music and you don't put too much pressure on yourself, then yes, it can absolutely give you a chance to explore the more entrepreneurial side of things. And that's the struggle of, I think, a lot of society is just a lot of times you can't get out of a 9 to 5 because you're literally relying on that. And so when you get home, for example, you're so tired and spent from the day that you don't have enough creative juice to write music. But if you do have some extra time, for example, then it might be worth it to explore other avenues of, I don't know, passive income or trying to earn other forms of income in other ways. But
Yeah.
definitely makes sense to take advantage of our natural, I guess, creative abilities whenever we can.
Well, I think people put a lot of pressure on themselves too. Like I've had so many students that it's like they don't want to necessarily do music full time, but they put pressure on themselves to do it. Maybe because maybe it's a comparison thing. Like maybe if they're working with a teacher who's doing music full time, that they feel inclined to justify or something.
Right.
But like I always like when I used to teach piano, I would always tell my students like, what is it like? What are your goals? Because the last thing I want to do is teach you to be a concert pianist if
Right.
you want to go and study medicine. Like, you know,
Right. Exactly.
it doesn't have to be one or the other. You can keep music in your
Yes.
life and not make a career out of it.
It's especially tough, especially like when you have little kids who are basically forced to play by their parents, and so
Right.
sometimes you're like, yeah, I mean, what do you want to play today? Nothing.
My mom told me to be here.
Yeah,
And you're like, oh yeah. Mine
Okay,
too.
well, what do you want me to do about it? You're like,
Yeah.
no, let me go home. It's like not much you can
teach
do.
like a lot of young kids, or do you?
I mean, I still have young kids, and most of them are great, but
Yeah.
I think it's inevitable. You always have, the occasional student who's there just because they have to be there, and sometimes that's the aspect of teaching where you're just like, okay, well, okay, 45 more minutes, let's do it.
Yeah, I totally relate.
I mean, when you do have the students who actually do want to be there and are actually putting in the effort, then it makes it a lot more enjoyable, and you feel like there's a purpose to what you're doing,
Yeah. You also see through kids' eyes too. I think when they learn music, I found it really inspiring. I remember you teach just some very simple, small thing. And like with those good kids who
Yes.
their eyes would light up and you're just like, wow, I remember what that felt like. You know?
Right.
'Cause I think we're always, I think John Powell said this, that like we're always trying to recreate the music that like excited us as kids.
Yes.
We're
I
trying
agree with
to
that,
recreate
yeah.
the feeling almost. Like
Yes.
even if the result is different, it's about we're trying to like get that feeling back out of ourselves. Which I think is really true.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, come to think of that I think that's why we all make music it's just because we love music so much. And if we can make someone else feel like that, then, even better. But yeah. Like the influences we grow up with, the inspirations we draw, those can all shape our unique voices. And so we all have something unique to contribute to the world in a way, which is nice.
Do you write music on your own, like outside of? Well, actually, I kind of know that you do, but because I know your album, which I definitely want you to talk about too. Is that something you do actively or occasionally, or?
You mean just like writing music in general?
Yeah, outside of like the business element or being commissioned.
Yeah. So I mean, actually writing music is something that I give myself total like freedom to do. I don't really put myself under deadlines. The only deadline I did was for the album. I said like, okay, I want to have this album done by the end of August, and that was in January. So yeah, but like I'm in the fortunate position where I'm earning an income from other things right now. So I had more free time to actually write music whenever I wanted to write music instead of having to do it because I just had to. So like I would have trouble putting on a piece of music that I didn't really like, but at the same time, I respect the people that do for sure. And it's a totally different mindset altogether. But yeah, for me, it's a totally like different. Yeah. Like I just do it because I maybe have an idea in my head that I can't get out. And if I put it out there and I really enjoy it, then I know it's a piece that I'm proud to actually create,
Yeah, for me, it's like a room that I don't visit too often in a house or something. Because for me, I do a lot of composing for people, which I actually really enjoy. Like I love the challenge of writing different types of music, and I find that really stimulating, trying to find ways to like infuse my interests into it.
Right.
But I, at the same time, totally understand what you're talking about, which is like, you're asking me to change my music, compromise my work, and like I can tell that you're flexible as it is too, but like I also know a lot of people who really just can't do that, and then to flip it around, like I actually don't write too much music for myself, especially not like these days. It's almost something that I find I have to make a decision to do for a period of time, like write an album, for example, because it's and once I access that door or that room, I find like I feel very like rejuvenated and sort of almost youthful in like the way I approach music.
Right.
But it's sort of like something I have to actively tap into and be like, okay, it's time to do something, for me, make some music for me. And I think it's really important to do, actually.
Definitely. I mean, the question is like, why did you get into writing music in the first place? Right. And I think for most of us, it's like, okay, it's either I want to write music for myself as an artist, which is kind of like my camp, or I want to write for, media or concert music or something. I want, it to be performed by other people, and I want to see or hear my music in other places. But it all comes down from a love of creating. So however we do it, as long as we capture that feeling of just enjoying the process and doing it because we love it, then I think, there's no right or wrong there, right?
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, that's very, very true. And because it can fulfill different needs for different types of people too. I think that's a really good point. So like with your album, because I want to make sure you have a chance to talk about that too, which is amazing, by the way. You captured, you did so many different things on your own or with some limited help. Like, it's really amazing, man. You should be super proud of it.
It was a lot of fun, for sure. I mean, honestly, it was just a chance for me to put all of my different influences into one album. And I've always, appreciated pop music, and the Disney stuff has always been my go-to for sure. But again, it was just like a chance to culminate all of my past experience writing mockups and stuff into an album, and then have an excuse to sing more as well, and just put everything together in one cohesive project. And that's kind of what I wanted to do. So yeah, whether it was like Disney stuff or big band stuff or poppy stuff, or I don't know, more indie stuff, I just wanted to be able to capture a piece of myself in a period of time, and then just have that, stored somewhere, and then move on from that. But
did you feel that you developed any techniques or things that you feel like you're going to carry forward from the album, like specifically from making that album?
That's an interesting one.
It's a bit loaded, I suppose, because I'm thinking about my album, and I feel like there were a couple things I did that I was like, oh, that's like a thing I'm gonna do now.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about that. But like, I think for me, it was just a matter of speeding up my workflow a little bit, and because a lot of the process was pretty similar. Like, I would come up with a kind of, a sketch, and then lay down a scratch vocal, and then arrange around that, and then record the final vocals, and then, mix it and whatever. So it wasn't, I don't think I can really think of something where I was like, okay, that's like one technique that, I'm going to carry forward. But I did have the experience to work with, some live musicians, which was great. Or I should say remote musicians for the big band song, when they recorded all their parts and sent them over. That was fun to kind of edit them and put them all together and, hear them separately, and then all of that. That was a great experience for sure.
What were they playing? What instruments?
So there, there's a trumpet player, there was a sax player, and the trombone player. And then one of my friends also played guitar, and then someone else played drums on it. So it was a lot of fun just for that one song. And then a lot of people were asking like, what libraries did you use? I'm like, and then I would tell them to guess, and they would guess like Glory Days and like whatever. I'm like, nope, they're real players. I'm like, oh, okay.
That's it is a very like satisfying feeling. I've had that too. I just released a track, and there was one spot with 3 seconds of real violin. Of course, that's a spot they're like, wait, what is that? It's a human.
Right. Oh, that's so good.
Everybody's like locking in.
Right.
Was that the first time you've outsourced music to other musicians?
Yeah, in terms of actually hiring someone to play something for me, I think this album was the first time I did that. So there was that song, and then there was the other song called Ready, which there's a live guitar on there as well. And then there's also live guitar on the song Together as well. So I believe this is the first time I actually hired people to play something for me. And I would definitely do it again, because it would take me way too long to do a big band mock-up, properly.
Yeah. So that's what I was going to ask you. Did you even mock up any of that stuff you gave to players, or you just sent it straight to them?
I just did it straight in Sibelius, and then I think I printed out a scratch file, like the stock MP3 from Sibelius, and then just sent it over,
Yeah, that's a lot easier. Yeah, agreed. It is so much easier, especially when you're selling things to clients too. That's, I think, one of the trickiest things too about like the media composing is you have to fill in their imagination, even if it means you're about to go send it to a bunch of real musicians who will make it sound better.
Yes.
you know, but
yeah. Like ultimately with jazz and all that, it's very, very difficult to mock up properly, even if you spend a lot of time doing it. And I know with your recent video with the, big band and strings and the orchestra stuff, that mock up sounded great, but when you have the real players play it, it's it's
so
entirely
better.
different world for sure. But like, just the fact that we have the tools available to do it in the first place is super cool anyway.
Yeah, and even when I did that project too, truthfully, like I spent so much more time than I needed to and should have.
Okay.
It was sort of like that was the first time I was just getting into mockups a lot more at that time, and I thought it was a great excuse for myself to just try and make it sound. I wanted to see what happens if I make a mockup sound as good as I possibly can, and then give it to an orchestra. And and it was very affirming that just like the orchestra sounded so much better. Like,
sure.
It was cool to see actually that a lot of the balances were the same. Like that was kind of, I was satisfied about that because I was guessing, but at the same time it was just the orchestra. I mean, they just pop with life, and it did just require so much less finessing because of how much time they put into their craft. You can simply just tell them, can you play this portamento and gracefully, and they'll just do it, and you don't have to be like, what's the modulation value for that? It's a very creatively fulfilling kind of thing doing that.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, like it's more important than ever, I think, if you want your stuff performed live, to actually be able to create a mock-up that sounds halfway decent, with all the tools we have now, it's there really is no room to have something that sounds super subpar. So that I guess that can also bring up the topic of samples, right? It's like, do you invest in a set of really good samples, or do you kind of, if you don't have too much money, do you invest in something that's a little cheaper but might not give you the same results?
Oh, that's like the question for the ages, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know about you, but I've always invested in I had always invested in small, cheaper samples for a long time, piecing libraries together. And only in the last year and a half have I been like, you know what? I have a lot of crap.
Right.
And I have to consolidate and just make some long-term investments.
Yeah.
But to the flip side, maybe that's not something maybe that's not the right decision for someone just starting off. Like maybe it's you start small to make sure that you're actually going to take it seriously.
Exactly.
Because otherwise people will overinvest too early.
Yes, very true. And the fact that we have these free libraries nowadays that actually do sound pretty good, like layers from OT or lab stuff from Spitfire, or Cinesamples has good stuff, Embertone, whatever. It can give you a really good chance to just dip your toes in the water and see. And even just a standard all-in-one library like the Orchestra by Sonoscore or Albion or whatever it is, like you can dip your toes in and East West, right? Like their composer
East West.
That's a great option too, right? So
that's what I started with. I was all East West strings, wind, and brass, I think.
There you go.
It was the silver librry back when they would do the tiers.
Yes.
And then I got really annoyed with, I think, string silver.
Oh yeah, okay.
Went through a bunch of them. Well, to be fair, back then I was immature and I didn't realize what's required, in terms of sample delay. I would just get so frustrated that I couldn't play it and it wouldn't just sound legato.
Oh, yeah.
Now,
fair.
I use Cinematic Studio Series, which I think sounds phenomenal.
Yes.
But am very acclimated to the delay that happens from it.
Yes.
It just depends on your preferences, because you make little sacrifices here and there no matter what you pick, I suppose.
For sure. And some libraries that do have built-in delays or even algorithms that can kind of process your MIDI data for you and try to spit out a more accurate performance, that's going to be something that can benefit your performance in the long run. So there's no point in being frustrated about having to wait an extra second for the sound to come out or something.
Yeah, agreed.
So
the trade-off's worth it.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm always fine with nudging my notes back a few seconds. And when people say oh, that delay is too long, I just can't do it, I'm always just like, well, but the result at the end is what you're going
Sounds
for.
great. Yeah. There's, I think there's little tweaks that people can do too, depending on what they like. Like what I've done, I've tried a bunch of different things to compensate. There's the Thanos Plug-In. I don't know if you heard of that or used it.
I've never even, no.
Yeah. It was scripter that goes into Logic. Somebody made it specifically for Cinematic Studio Strings.
Gotcha. Cool.
It was all the articulation sets, but included in the data when you put an articulation set in was the negative delay value that would need to go through for that specific articulation. So you wouldn't have to do any adjustment beyond quantizing. Right. Which is great, but the downside was you couldn't actually hear the playback when it was enabled. Oh. So you'd have to turn it off, play, turn it on.
I see.
Then I played with like a velocity processor, making all the notes fixed velocity, because then you know the sample delay is predictable.
Yes.
And then now, ironically, I have the easiest setup, which is just I picked a default, sample delay. Yeah. And then I just have some velocity key switches that just will be like the quiet velocity, the medium one, the loud one.
Right.
And it's the best one, actually. The one that was least work was the best solution.
Exactly. Simple is just better sometimes. For sure. Yeah.
Is that what do you use primarily in your libraries? Do you have like all one or?
Yeah, I think for like strings, CSS and Vistas is probably my go-to right now. And for solo strings, I love the CSSS. There's just a lot of detail in there. Yeah, and then for winds, like Berlin and stuff is really good. The soloist libraries, and then also the Cinematic Studio Winds, of course, beautiful. Those take care of all my wind needs for sure. And then for brass, Cinebrass, and sometimes Cinematic Studio Brass.
Cool.
And then for perk is always Cineperk, and then sometimes Damage 2, and that's pretty much it. So like super, super simple. And for harps, Cineharps, piano, Cinepiano, a lot of sample stuff.
No, Cinesample is great. I had used their Cinebrass for a long time, and then I moved over to Cinematic Studio Brass, and realized because I do love Cinematic Studio Brass, but there are many, many, many times where I'll pull in Cinebrass for more bite and power.
Yes.
They just have it. Really is really good. Like I use that. What is it?
Let me guess.
It's a 16 horn patch or something. Like just
12 horns. Yeah.
12 horns. Right. I just use that absurd amount of times because it's just
for sure.
It's so. And realistically, when you send it to like an orchestra, I can't. So many times I have to tell people, like, if it's like an orchestration, it's like, listen, man, we got 5 horns. Like, this is not gonna sound like Inception. You have to be ready for this.
That's it. Right? That's great.
But for media stuff and mockups, like, it's such a great thing to have.
For sure.
But
Cinebrass is definitely like a one-of-a-kind library. And the funny thing is, even though Cinematic Studio Brass has all those dynamic layers and the highest ones sound absolutely insane, the actual like clarity and bite of Cinebrass, you can't really beat it. It's pretty special.
It's really, I find I like Cinematic Studio Series for some of the quieter dynamics on a lot of stuff, particularly the brass, because it's just really a lot of libraries I find when you go, as soon as you go 0 to like 10, it's like, and you get a big swell. And Cinematic Studio Series seems to have the most, for me, like linear velocity, I guess, like in terms of dynamic.
Right.
Like, because they also go to nothing, right? Don't they?
Yes,
when you go to 0?
Yes, they do.
Which I freaking love because that's so helpful.
Yes.
But I like Cinebrass as well. We use almost the same libraries. I think the only one I don't have Berlin Winds.
Right.
I've heard they're amazing. It's just
I bought them all when they were like at the most expensive too. So I've had moments of like, okay, well now they're on sale. All right.
I know. It's like Black Friday's coming up now when we're making this video.
Exactly.
I'm trying really, really hard this year to actually not buy anything because I know that I have enough.
Yes.
Like I actually just got I've been wanting to get it for a while. Like that's one thing I tend to do is wait. Like I try to wait a long time, and if it's like I still want this thing, then I'll get it.
Right.
But I got the Hans Zimmer percussion.
Cool.
Spitfire,
okay.
Because I just heard so many people talking about it, and I don't even have Damage.
Right.
I was like, I don't have a hybrid thing. It's just pieced together $15 libraries.
Oh, okay. Then for your, it's definitely worth it then, right? Investing in just a solid perk library.
I just want I feel like as I get older, I like when things are more consolidated. Like it's just predictable in a lot of ways. You spend less time balancing things.
Yeah.
Like having used Cinematic Studio Series through almost my whole library now, it's just really, really predictable. And it's just it doesn't even matter what it is, like Spitfire or Cinesamples. Like, it's just the consolidation's really nice.
Right. And especially, like, can you imagine when the Cinematic Studio Percussion actually does come out? I'm sure you'll be like 100%er.
Oh, I'm going. Yeah, I'm going for it. They haven't released a library that I haven't liked yet.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know if you have any of the Stretsov choir stuff.
I have the Essentials library. I also have Ultimate, but yeah.
I actually love the Essentials library. Like they had sent that to me to demo.
Yes.
And I thought it was really cool, but I didn't realize how much I was going to use it, especially for the polyphonic legato. Like that blows my mind. It really, really helps. It's just crazy.
It is very useful. And I think at this moment, the only developers I know of that consistently have used it is Stretsov and Cinesamples, actually.
True, right? They do too.
With their horns, and they have their poly legato, which is really cool. And that was back in 2010 or something, 2011. So
yeah, kind of wild. Great. And I do you think that that's something that like all developers will have in the future? Or do you think do you see it as a gimmick or as an inevitability?
Honestly, yeah, good question. I mean, like, honestly, I think it will become more necessary, I think, for developers to try to keep up. Like, in order for them to try to attract more people, let's say, then I think those types of features will be ones that will either be like way more convenient for some people, but maybe some people will just be like, oh, I could just do that with 2 patches. Like, it doesn't really matter. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, as long as the playability and the sound and, all that lines up with what you're looking for, I think it's good. But yeah, I would imagine the poly stuff is maybe good for like DVC purposes, maybe,
Yeah. So. Right. Well, it certainly makes it easier. I think that it would make it easier in terms of balance, because I believe that some of the Stretsov ones will actually split the sound. So, which is wild. So you'll actually get the half sections.
Right. I
think Afflatus does that. Their string
library. Yes, it does.
Yeah,
that's
which
cool.
is incredible too. And I'm not sure. I'd have to talk to, like, I do orchestration, but I'd have to talk to an orchestrator and ask them if that makes their life easier or more difficult when you have a DVZ on one track. Because there's workarounds to split. I think it's okay as long as they don't come to unison. Because as soon as they do unison, you can't do tools like top voice.
Yeah.
You know? So, gotcha. Yeah, I would be curious, because that's a whole process in itself. Eventually, I want to get an orchestrator on here to, like, ask them questions.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Yeah.
Be like, what can we do to make your life easier?
Yes. Yeah, you could talk to maybe David Christensen if he's open. He does a lot of Alex Pfeffer's scores and a lot of transcriptions. So
it's cool to see people, like, kind of emerging out of the woodwork. Like, especially during quarantine, there's been more and more people like that.
It's so true. Yeah, I mean, now's the best time out of any time to make a presence for yourself, because so many people are online now.
Well, I suppose we kind of have already talked about it, but I mean, I just think it's worth bringing up. You live in Canada now, right?
Yeah.
And you were saying that, like, all of your work has come primarily from like your online presence. Yeah. So, I mean, do you feel like an advocate, like, in a way for not for Canadians, but for people living outside of major cities like Los Angeles and New York, like, to encourage? Do you find that are you optimistic for those kinds of people who are concerned about not living in those major cities?
Yeah, I think it's a very valid concern, but again, it has to come down to what you want to do. So if you're trying to write for Hollywood films, then it might be better to actually live in LA, where those people actually are, because those people want to work with people they can actually meet with in person, right, and have in-person conversations with. Like, I actually, you introduced me to a gig, and it was like an orchestration thing, and unfortunately, I wasn't able to do it because I wasn't in LA. So.
Right, I know. I'm sorry.
No, it's not. No. I totally appreciate that, and but of course that's something that you just can't avoid sometimes. And but then again, if you're just trying to make an online presence for yourself and maybe just do some freelance work and get some online students, and your goal is not to write for the biggest films, then it makes it a lot easier to not live in those areas. Like, you can live anywhere.
Yeah. Well, I can, as someone living in LA now, I can say that I still believe that the majority of the work that I get is actually through my online presence.
Cool.
The benefits I feel I get from being here have to do more with like personal benefits. Like it's enjoyable to talk to another composer who's in the industry and like have lunch with them and just like share war stories or whatever. That's an enjoyable thing, but it's not my day to day. I mean, I certainly don't commute. In fact, I think I've left the house once this week. So like, you know, it really, like you said, it depends on what you want. And even for myself, like I still see myself as sort of a remote composer because I want to have the freedom to be able to choose where I live, not be dictated by having to spend $3 million to house in Pasadena. You know? Like eventually it would be nice to move out of LA, and I don't want my work to be hinged on my necessity of being here. So in a way, I try to build my work portfolio up the same way that you do, actually, which is remotely.
Interesting.
You know?
Interesting.
So I think people have the wrong idea that like, oh, you know, once you're suddenly in a major city like this, like everything changes. It's not really. Maybe because of quarantine, my experience has been, you know, more like yours, but I don't think that's necessarily true. And it might just have to do with the fact that also like I'm not, you know, going to remote control studios and knocking on the door and asking for an assistant job. You know, my needs might be slightly different than somebody else's. So,
yeah, well, I'd be curious, like, what is your, like, let's say 5 to 10 year goal? If you're thinking of, you know, doing more remote work and stuff, what would be the ideal?
I mean, honestly, a lot of what I'm doing just bigger. Like when I was young, I think a lot of us felt, you know, a lot of our goals were very like, you know, starry, which I think is great.
Ambitious.
But like, yeah, exactly. I mean, like, I always saw myself as like, you know, I want to score for Pixar. Or something really, really specific like that. And as I've gotten older, I've realized that it's not really about the company. It's not about Pixar or Nintendo. It's about the feeling you get from those things. And you can have a strong relationship with your music and with the people you work with, working on something that is much smaller or much smaller budget or remote. And it's not a sacrifice or a trade-off. It's actually, there are sacrifices and trade-offs both ways. If you go to work for a large company, even like, you know, I've done some Disney stuff. Like, you know, the Disney stuff is really fun, but I wouldn't say that it makes it more fun than any other projects I've done. Like it's not just like, wow, now that it's Disney, it is so much better. It's actually really pretty much the same, you know? And the requirements are different, you know, because with a large company, there's a lot of people on the ladder. So it's like, you know, you make a decision and then it goes up, and then the project's done, or so you thought, and then 2 weeks later, down, and you have more to do. You know? So it really depends on your goals. But like for me, some of the most fun projects I've done to date, I think, are a lot of like web animations. I've really enjoyed what it's like doing that with companies. I really enjoy small form projects with tight deadlines. That's one thing I've learned. I did a full length film score. It wasn't even half as fun as like a 3-minute thing with a 2-day turnaround. So like my goal is just to continue to do more of that stuff. And I guess the beauty of that is it probably could be remote work.
For sure.
And then also like just building, I really get a fulfillment out of building a community of like people that I work with. It's just a very lonely industry in a lot of ways. Composing can be very lonely. So it's really nice to have other people to work with you and communicate to. And I just find that very fulfilling personally.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. What about you? Your 5 to 10 year goals?
Yeah, man, that's the question, right?
Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
There you go. Technically, it is an interview, so.
Right. Yeah. True. You got the job.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, I would love to, kind of like you said, I maybe just continue what I'm doing, but just continue doing it on a consistent basis. Like, I want to keep on doing the YouTube stuff as long as possible, which directly impacts my online business. So I want to be able to make a living from that 100%, not have to worry about, finances, and then just have the freedom to really work on any projects that spark my interest, really. And there's there's really no other position I think I'd rather be in, right? Because the stigma is you can't make a living in music, but what if you could? So maybe that's not writing for like the biggest companies, but I'm actually scared of doing work for like huge companies or things like that, because if one thing goes wrong, then it's very easy to tarnish yourself or maybe I'm just thinking of the worst, but at the same time, when you have your own freedom to do and create the music you want, then you're literally just writing music because you want to write music, and there's nothing better, I think. So.
Yeah, I think 100%. You said it in a more eloquent, short way than I did. Just getting paid, getting paid to do what you love is really, there's really nothing better. And I mean, also to like your credit, because I say this because I try to remind myself this, like you're already doing it.
Oh, thanks, man.
You're making a living, you're killing it, you're doing it. You've got a presence. People know who you are in the community, and like you're doing a phenomenal job. So like,
thank you.
Because again, I always have to remind myself this, as much more as we want, and like we're always wanting to do more, like at the same time, like you're doing it. So I think you should be super proud of where you've come and what you've accomplished in a really short period of time. I had no idea your channel was only 4 years old.
I mean, 4 years seems like a long time to me.
I mean, my channel's been around since 2008, so...
Hey, you're one of the early adopters. That's impressive. But
you see my earliest videos, I'm literally like 9 years old or something.
Yeah. No one check out my piano channel, please.
Yeah, that's right. We gotta find the other channels.
That's right. But I mean, like we were saying, just working in music, I think is a privilege, and if we can just appreciate the moments that we have in it and not turn it into a grind if we don't have to, then it's even better. Because a lot of people are in the position where they want to do music and they don't really enjoy their 9 to 5, but maybe if they actually quit their 9 to 5 and worked on music full time, they might grow to resent that too. So it's kind of
very
dangerous.
much. Yeah, it's like that movie. You ever see the movie Soul?
Yeah.
It's like the that movie hit me so hard. I was talking about like you could become essentially like slave to your passion, just as much as the things you don't want to do.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah.
So true. And I think that's where it's really important to have that work-life balance and find hobbies outside of your career, which I find very challenging, but also really important.
That's great. Yeah. And speaking of Soul, actually technically the second track on my album is inspired by Soul, actually.
I didn't realize
you're curious.
That.
It's called Spark. You know the moment where they're about to jump down to earth together at the end?
Yeah.
So that there's funny in the background, there's like an A drone, like duh, in the bass. And then I was like, oh, that kind of makes me want to write a song in A major about finding your purpose,
Oh, cool. Oh, so this is anyway. like Pink Floyd and the Wizard of Oz. I could put your music against Soul and it would sync up the whole way through.
If we're lucky.
That's awesome, man. Well, anyway, Chris, it's so awesome talking to you. Everybody, please be sure to check out Chris's album. It's phenomenal.
Thanks so much, man.
And also, Chris linked the VSTs that we were talking about. He has a good article talking about his best cinematic orchestral libraries. He's got that linked in the description, so you can check that out.
Thanks so much for having me, man. Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Appreciate it.
We're out. We did it.